So I just switched from 5e to Pathfinder 2nd Edition, specifically the remastered version of 2nd Edition, or close to it as I can get, because my players are running stuff from the Advanced Player's Handbook, and some things haven't been remastered yet, but largely remastered. I've been a D&D 5e DM for several years now, about 4 or 5, and I've run for 2 groups pretty regularly, weekly, bi-weekly. So I've had between 10 and 12 players play with me, and we all got started in 5e. We have played a few other games. We've played Call of Cthulhu, we've played some OSR things, Shadow Dark, Knave, Into the Odd, and a few others. But largely for our main campaign, we've been with 5e. We're all very comfortable with it. But I decided I was a little bored with 5e. It was kind of limiting, and we decided to branch out and see what else was out there. I have run 2 sessions of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and here's my thoughts. One of the biggest things that people say about it is it's crunchy. Yes, 5e is not as crunchy as Pathfinder 2nd Edition, but that's not bad. You are going to have to adapt to some things that are different. There's not advantage and disadvantage. There's very few things in it that work that way. You are going to have to add 1, 2, and 3, or subtract 1, 2, and 3, but that's not terrible. I kind of like things to be a little more crunchy. But one of the things that kind of concerned me when I was researching 2nd Edition and Pathfinder in general is there seems to be, at least online in certain communities, people that are not open to the idea of homebrewing, tinkering, modifying the game in any way. You'll see some sentiment of don't touch the rules, they're perfect, and that's not what I've experienced. The rules are not perfect. They're good, but no system's perfect. What I have learned is they're just as modular as 5e is. Granted, I've only run 2 sessions, but my DM style seems or tends to be more of the I make it up as I need to. We'll go back and see what the real thing is later, and if we don't like it, we change it, which I think is the key to most successful tabletop RPGs. You make it what you want, not what the rules say it has to be. It's your table, it's not their game. But you do get a lot of that from what I've seen online. It's our game, don't touch it. Don't let that disturb you. You can still take the game, modify it, and homebrew it. So a few things I've learned from these 2 sessions. 1, 3-action economy. It's fun, but it's easy to forget if you're coming from 5e that you have 3 actions. Players constantly wanted to just skip their 3rd action because they're like, I either have this massive negative to my attack or I don't know what else to do. And I keep having to tell them, don't forfeit one of your actions. It's kind of important to do everything. I mean, if you're just going to waste it, you can't really complain if things don't go your way. Another thing that I was kind of run into is how do you track all of the conditions? There are bleed, there's fatigue, there is stupefied, frightened. There is a ton of conditions in this game. And what I've learned is a lot of them are different variations of the same thing. There's one that penalizes strength, there's one that penalizes dexterity, there's one that penalizes intelligence, I think it's intelligence, nope, constitution, and then there's one that penalizes the other 3. They work largely the same, just with different names. Then you have some that stack on top of one another, so you have one that supersedes another. Yes, there's a lot of names and a lot of conditions, but none of them are really that abstract and hard to understand. One of the things that came up in this most recent session is persistent damage. I don't tend to stop and look up rules too much when we play, but I did look this one up, and I realized persistent damage is kind of up to the DM when it ends. Until I read that sentence, I just like, does it keep going forever until you succeed to roll? No, it ends when the DM says. We had a player, they were taking persistent bleed damage. The fight was over. I didn't see a point in them having to continually roll it, especially if the bleed damage is 1 per turn. Just say it ends at the end of the fight. Little things like that really do lend themselves to the DM having more control than you would think at first. One of the things I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with is encounter mode. I'm not sure I like it. People praise it. They say it's fantastic. But if you have players that read the book, which I need to learn to read the book, but if you have players that read the book, when you read encounter mode, it kind of looks like you've only got like 8 choices you can do when you're not in a fight. So I've got to pick one of these things when that's not entirely true. It's meant, I think what it's meant to do is give the DM kind of some guidance on what you can do when the players choose to do this type of thing, not necessarily hold specifically to, well, they did this, therefore you give them this +1 or +2 bonus. That's nice, but if you want to give them less, give them more, or just have some guidance on where to start. If somebody picks something, you're like, I wasn't expecting that. It's just a starting point. I wouldn't get too bogged down in that because the bonuses they give you, other than probably follow the expert, which lets one character help another one succeed at a skill check, they're not game breaking. One of the other things I learned about the book, and I learned this the hard way, is the book has little call-out blocks, the little colored boxes on the pages that kind of give you more detailed example of certain things. Most of the valuable information in the Pathfinder books appear in those little call-out blocks, and not as much in the main text, or at least that's what I've discovered. It took me a while to figure out character creation, because the call-out box in the very middle of the page, the thing that you would think you'd look at first, which my brain skips over for some reason, says you add an extra boost to a stat. Well, it wasn't on the right-hand side, really, and I was just following the right-hand side of the page. It said you do this, 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 and this. I didn't even notice that in the middle of the page until after I was trying to cobble together, I think, a third character just to get the hang of doing it. And I realized, these call-out boxes, they're very important in the book. So if you're just starting with the book, pay attention to those. They clear things up. Speaking of character creation, at least in the remastered rules, there's no real rolling for stats. Everything's done with boosts. And one of the things that I didn't realize is that at level 1, you can't have higher than a +4 to a stat. It just doesn't work. Once you hit +4, it takes 2 boosts to up the stat by +1. So that's a little gotcha that's hidden in there that I didn't notice at first. And if you haven't noticed, this is kind of me just rambling about my experiences running the first 2 sessions with it. I thought it went pretty good overall, and I'm probably going to make more videos checking in with what I've learned, what's adapted coming from 5e. But if you're out there thinking, I want to try it, but it looks big and scary, it's really not that bad. When I first read through it, I was like, I've made a mistake. I bought this book. I don't really know if I want to do this anymore. And after I got tinkering with it, I realized it's not nearly as bad as I originally thought. I would say 80% of it's exactly the same as what you're used to playing with 5e, and it is modular enough that you can add and subtract things to it. One of the other things I like about it is that they tag almost everything in the book. Is it for humanoid? Is it a hex? Is it a focus spell? The tags are just there really to help you know if a certain action, ability, what have you, is affected by another thing. If a spell says affects all humanoids, you can look to see if it's tagged for that. But one thing I will point out as far as the tags go, certain abilities, skills, actions have specific tags based on their class, like flourish or hex or unstable. And your players really need to at least know what the tags are for their class. Now in 5e, most classes, they're about the same. At least when it comes to certain class features, they're not really having to learn new rules. And Pathfinder is mostly the same, but there are certain abilities that modify things. For example, Hex. If somebody's playing a witch and they have a spell that's labeled as a Hex, you can only do 1 per turn. Your players need to at least know that. They don't get to treat everything the same across the board, kind of like you did in 5e. These are the things that just kind of came to mind. It's kind of a ramble. I'll probably have more rambles, but try Pathfinder. It's good. It's not scary, and it's a decent alternative to 5e, especially with the way things are changing with their company rules and what have you.